Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
I stand to call the quorum be terminated.
Without objection.
Mr. President, we appreciate everyone's patience in allowing the leader, Republican leader and I to come and say a few words. The measure before the Senate today is a model of bipartisan legislation. Its 4 component parts were reported out of 4 different committees with bipartisan support. Mr. President, could we have order in the Senate?
Take your conversations out of the well, please.
85 senators voted to begin debate on this legislation. As everyone will remember, we had to file cloture on a motion to proceed to this bill, and the Senate agreed we should move forward on this legislation. This bill will create or save 3 million middle-class jobs and enjoys broad support among rank-and-file members. Over 1,000 different organizations support this legislation, from the Chamber of Commerce, AFL-CIO, AAA. It has the endorsement of one of the Senate's most conservative members and one of its most liberal members, the 2 main managers of this legislation. Democrats and Republicans have agreed additionally to 30 other germane relevant amendments. So there should be nothing standing in the way of progress on this crucial legislation. Yet for weeks, Republicans have refused to work with Democrats to finalize a path forward. So in a few moments, the Senate will vote on whether to end debate on this measure. In effect, end the filibuster, another filibuster. Mr. President, the bill before this body is a bill that has been generated by the Environment and Public Works Committee. We have a provision in it from the Commerce Committee, a provision in it from the Finance Committee, a provision in it from the Banking Committee. That's before this body. But in addition to that, we have 37 amendments. That's part of this measure that's before the body. If we did nothing else but invoke cloture on this and pass this, send it to the House where we would have a conference, we would be way ahead. Because if we did nothing else, this bipartisan piece of legislation would help the American people save millions of jobs. It's really hard to comprehend that I had to file cloture on such a bipartisan bill, a measure Republican President Eisenhower and Democratic President Clinton could have agreed on and would have agreed on. 40 years after President Eisenhower won passage of the first highway bill, President Clinton said the law had succeeded in bringing Americans closer to each other. Clinton said, and I quote, "We were connected city to city, town to town, family to family, as well as we've never been before. The law did more to bring Americans together than any other law in this century." End of quote. And that, Mr. President, was said by Bill Clinton, but it was almost a copy of what President Eisenhower said in his memoir about the most important thing he did as President of the United States was this piece of legislation. And that says a lot coming from President Eisenhower. I had great optimism that the transportation legislation before the Senate today would bring our 2 parties closer together, as interstate highways brought the American people closer together in the 50s, 60s, and the 70s. So it's disappointing that Republican leadership would jeopardize this legislation and 3 million American jobs to pursue this ideological agenda. I'm hopeful the Senate will shortly vote and debate and move this much-needed jobs legislation forward. Only 7 Republicans are needed to allow us to do this. Only 7 out of the 47 that they have to join us and move forward. But it seems more likely that my Republican colleagues will continue to take orders from the Tea Party and filibuster this jobs measure. Republicans are quite plainly holding up the surface transportation bill when they vote against cloture. That's what cloture means. It means that the Senate agrees that we need to focus on the germane amendments and bring endless debate to a close. Senate Republican leaders are taking a page out of the Carnival's magician's book. They've been saying now since February 9th, look over here, look over here. They've been insisting on votes on contraception, on loosening clean water standards, on drilling for oil pretty much anywhere there's water. But as the Carnival magician says, look over there. Mr. President, There's no need to look over there because it's just an effort to divert attention from what's really happening. No one should be fooled by what's going on here. A vote against cloture is a vote against moving forward on this very important bipartisan legislation. And that's true no matter what diversions anyone might try to distract attention from this very important piece of legislation that is now ours to move forward on.
Mr. President, we have, as the Majority Leader indicated, have had a number of very constructive conversations about reaching an agreement on voting on both germane and non-germane amendments to this bill, and I think we're very close to getting there. My concern is that if cloture is invoked right now, we won't get an agreement, and amendments that we're very close to agreeing to have considered on both sides, the amendments that are sought to be offered here, not just on the Republican side, but on the Democratic side as well, that they will end up being shut out. If we were not so close, I might have a different view, but we're very close to getting an agreement. And if we invoke cloture right now, that agreement will not come together. So I would encourage a no vote, not to stop the bill. This is a bill that's not going to be stopped. It has a broad bipartisan support. Senator Boxer and Senator Inhofe have worked very hard on this legislation, and we anticipate being able to wrap it up. But just to underscore where we are, I've indicated I would like to offer a unanimous consent agreement that kind of summarizes sort of where I think we are. I would ask consent that the pending Reid amendment be withdrawn, that it be in order to offer a new perfecting amendment cleared by both leaders, which contains the three titles. Further, that following the non-relevant amendments, the following non-relevant amendments be in order to S. 1813, and they be subject to the 60-vote affirmative threshold. Senator Collins, number 1660, Boilermack. Senator Vitter, number 1535, OCS. A widened side-by-side relevant to Senator Hoeven, number 1537. Hoeven 1537, related to the Keystone Pipeline. Levin Amendment on offshore tax havens, a McConnell or designee relevant to the Levin Amendment, a Cantwell Amendment on energy tax extenders, a McConnell or designee relevant to the Cantwell Amendment, a Menendez Amendment on natural gas, and a Coburn Amendment number 1738 on duplication. I further ask consent that the following highway-related amendments also be in order. Dement, number 1756, Coates, number 1517, Blunt, number 1517, Paul, 1556, Portman, 1736, Portman, 1742, Corker, 1785, Corker on Highway Trust Fund, number 1786, Hutchison, number 1568, and McCain, number 1669. 10 highway-related amendments to be offered by the Majority Leader or his designee. I further ask consent that following the disposition of the above-listed amendments and the manager's package of amendments to be cleared by both managers of the bill be read a third time and the Senate proceed to vote on passage of the bill as amended. Finally, I ask consent that following passage of S. 1813, the bill be held at the desk, and when the Senate receives the companion measure from the House, the Senate proceeds to its immediate consideration, all after the enacting clause be stricken. The text of S. 1813 as passed be inserted in lieu thereof. The bill then be read three times and passed. The Senate insist on its amendment, request a conference with the House, and the Chair be authorized to appoint conferees on the part of the Senate with a ratio agreed to with the concurrence of both leaders.
Is there objection?
Reserving the right to object, Mr. President.
Objection, sir.
I don't know why everything we do has to be a fight. Not a disagreement, a fight. This bill was brought up on February 7th, and we have been spending the better part of a month dealing with contraception. By the way, an amendment that I had to offer because they wouldn't bring it up so we could vote on it. My math says that the agreement here calls, that's been suggested by the Republican leader, calls for 34 amendments. Now, Mr. President, I understand and I appreciate some of them are related to what's in this bill. Some of them are. But as I indicated earlier, Mr. President, We've been dealing with contraception. These amendments deal with clean water standards, deals with clean air standards. Mr. President, nothing in this bill should deal with having America have to breathe more mercury, more lead, and then just for good measure, how about some arsenic? That has nothing to do with the highway bill. And as I said before, Mr. President, the amendment that I've looked at from my friend from Louisiana calls for drilling for oil any place there's water. Next, they'll be going to Lake Mead, outside Las Vegas. We are producing more oil now than in decades, domestic oil than in decades. The President has opened up areas in Alaska that have never been opened before. Why can't we just invoke cloture on this bill and move forward on it? It's not easy to get to conference, we know that. But we could go to conference. The House is doing their best to come up with a bill. They're struggling hard. On the first day of April, it will be April Fool's Day for a lot of people in America because we will lose almost 800,000 jobs on April 1st. It will be a real April Fool's Day. So if we cannot, Mr. President, move forward on this, why can't we get 7 Republicans to break from the pack over here and say not everything we do has to be an arm wrestling contest? So, Mr. President, I appreciate that we've at least got something in writing, and I appreciate that, and I'll take a look at it, but I object.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President, not to continue the debate much further, but I would point out there are demands for amendments on both sides here. We're very close to getting an agreement, and I think a no vote on cloture is not the end of this bill, but the beginning. And it gives us an opportunity to go on and wrap up discussions that have gone on entirely too long, it seems to me. And I know the majority leader's been frustrated by it, and so have I, but we were very close to getting an agreement on a list of amendments and should be able to finish this bill by the end of the week.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I am, for lack of a better word, disappointed. These amendments are going to do nothing to advance the work product of almost 3 million Americans. None of them. We should just invoke cloture, and I ask my Republican colleagues, break this impasse, do something that is good for the American people, invoke cloture. Stop a filibuster, another one.
The clerk will report the motion to invoke cloture.
Cloture motion. We, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, hereby move to bring to a close the debate on the Reid Amendment numbered 1761 to S. 1813, a bill to authorize federal aid highway and highway safety construction programs and for other purposes, signed by 17 senators.
By unanimous consent, the mandatory quorum call has been waived. The question is it a sense of the Senate that debate on amendment number 1761 offered by the senator from Nevada, Mr. Reid, to S. 1813, a bill to reauthorize federal aid highway and highway safety construction programs and for other purposes shall be brought to a close. The ayes and nays are mandatory under the rule. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka, Mr. Alexander. Ms. Ayotte. Mr. Barrasso. Mr. Baucus. Mr. Begich. Mr. Bennett. Mr. Bingaman. Mr. Blumenthal.
Ms. Blunt votes no.
Mr. Blunt. Mr. Bozeman. Mrs. Boxer. Mr. Brown of Massachusetts. Mr. Brown of Ohio. Mr. Burr. Ms. Cantwell. Mr. Cardin. Mr. Carper. Mr. Casey. Mr. Chambliss. Mr. Coates. Sir.
No.
Mr. Coburn. Mr. Cochran. Ms. Collins. Mr. Conrad. Mr. Coons. Mr. Corker. Mr. Cornyn. Mr. Dement. Mr. Durbin. Mr. Enzi. Mrs. Feinstein. Mr. Franken. Sir. Mr. Franken. Mrs. Gillibrand. Mr. Graham. Mr. Grassley. Mrs. Hagan. Mr. Harkin. Mr. Hatch. Mr. Heller. Mr. Hoven. Mrs. Hutchison. Mr. Inhofe. Mr. Inouye. Mr. Isaacson. Mr. Johans. Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin. Mr. Johnson of South Dakota. Mr. Carey. Mr. Kirk. Ms. Klobuchar. Mr. Cole. Mr. Kyle. Ms. Landrieu. Mr. Lautenberg. Mr. Leahy. Mr. Lee. Mr. Levin. Mr. Lieberman. Mr. Lugar. Mr. Manchin. Mr. McCain. Mrs. McCaskill. Mr. McConnell. Mr. Menendez. Mr. Merkley. Ms. Mikulski. Mr. Moran. Ms. Murkowski. Mrs. Murray. Mr. Nelson of Nebraska. Mr. Nelson of Florida. Mr. Paul. Mr. Portman. Mr. Pryor. Mr. Reed of Rhode Island. Mr. Reed of Nevada. Mr. Risch. Mr. Roberts. Mr. Rockefeller. Mr. Rubio. Mr. Sanders. Mr. Schumer. Mr. Sessions. Mrs. Shaheen. Mr. Shelby. Ms. Snow. Ms. Stabenow. Mr. Tester. Mr. Thune. Mr. Toomey. Mr. Udall of Colorado. Mr. Udall of New Mexico. Mr. Vitter. Mr. Warner. Mr. Webb. Mr. Whitehouse. Mr. Wicker. Mr. Wyden. Senators voting in the affirmative: Blumenthal, Boxer, Feinstein, Franken, Cole, Lautenberg, Levin, Menendez, Merkley, Mikulski, Nelson of Nebraska, Reed of Nevada, Schumer, Stabenow, and Tester. Mrs. Murray. Mrs. Murray, aye. Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown of Ohio, aye. Senators voting in the negative: Alexander, Barrasso, Blunt, Burr, Corker, Crapo, Hutchison, Inhofe, Kyle, McConnell, Moran, Sessions, Thune, Vitter, and Wicker. Mr. Warner. Mr. Warner, aye. Mr. Webb. Mr. Webb, aye. Mr. Roberts. Mr. Roberts, no. Mr. Paul. Mr. Paul, no. Mr. Cornyn, no. Mr. Lieberman, aye. Mr. Brown of Massachusetts, aye. Mr. Isaacson. Mr. Isaacson, no. Mr. Baucus. Mr. Baucus? Aye. Mr. Shelby? Mr. Shelby? No. Mr. Toomey? Mr. Toomey? No. Mr. Lugar? Mr. Lugar? No. Ms. Klobuchar? Ms. Klobuchar? Aye. Mr. Sanders? Mr. Sanders? Aye. Ms. Snow? Ms. Snow? No. Mr. Conrad? Mr. Conrad? Aye. Mr. Johans? Mr. Johans? No. Mr. Rubio? Mr. Rubio? No. Mr. Lee? Mr. Lee? No. Ms. Collins? Ms. Collins? Aye. Mr. Cochran? Mr. Cochran? No. Mr. Graham? Mr. Graham? No. Mr. Rockefeller? Mr. Rockefeller? Aye. Mr. Udall? Mr. Udall of New Mexico? Aye. Mr. Hoeven? Mr. Hoeven? No. Mr. Chambliss? Mr. Chambliss? No. Mr. Kerry? Mr. Kerry? Aye. Mr. Cardin. Mr. Cardin. Aye. Mr. Grassley. Mr. Grassley. No. Mrs. Gillibrand. Mrs. Gillibrand. Aye. Mr. Bennett. Mr. Bennett. Aye. Mr. Nelson. Mr. Nelson of Florida. Aye. Mr. Carper. Mr. Carper. Aye. Mrs. McCaskill. Mrs. McCaskill. Aye.
And then I'll work with Chuck and because Chuck's got the most creative staff in the world. Like,
Ms. Landrieu. Ms. Landrieu. Aye. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson of South Dakota. Aye. Mr. Dement. Mr. Dement. No.
great. I appreciate you.
Mr. Udall. Mr. Udall of New Mexico, of Colorado. Aye. Mr. Whitehouse. Mr. Whitehouse. Aye. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin. No. Mr. Portman. Mr. Portman. No. I don't think he ever... Ms. Ayotte. Ms. Ayotte. No. Mrs. Hagan. Mrs. Hagan. Aye. Mr. Bozeman. No. Mr. Enzi. Mr. Enzi. No. Mr. Manchin. Mr. Manchin. Aye. Mr. Coons. Mr. Coons. Aye. Mr. Coburn. Mr. Coburn, no. Mr. Bingaman. Mr. Bingaman, aye. Mr. Inouye. Mr. Inouye, aye. Mr. Pryor. Mr. Pryor, aye. Mr. Hatch. Mr. Hatch, No. Ms. Cantwell. Ms. Cantwell, aye. Mrs. Shaheen. Mrs. Shaheen, aye. Mr. Akaka. Mr. Akaka, aye. Mr. Casey. Mr. Casey, aye. Ms. Murkowski. Ms. Murkowski, no. McCain. Mr. McCain, no. Mr. Durbin. Mr. Durbin, aye. Mr. Harkin, aye. Mr. Reed of Rhode Island, aye. Mr. Coates, no. Mr. Wyden. Mr. Wyden, aye. Mr. Risch. Mr. Risch, no.
Majority Leader.
Mr. Reed, no.
Does any member want to change his or her vote? On this vote, the yeas are 52, the nays are 44, 3/5 of the senators duly chosen and sworn not having voted in the affirmative. The motion is not agreed to. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I enter a motion to reconsider the vote by which...
We get order in the chamber, please.
I enter a motion to reconsider the vote by which cloture was not invoked on the Reed amendment.
The motion is entered.
I ask unanimous consent the cloture vote with respect to the underlying bill be vitiated.
Without objection, so ordered. Under the previous order, the Senate stands in recess until 2:15 p.m.
And in that procedural vote that wraps up the Senate, they failed